Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us for the July episode of Chang Reaction. I'm Mary Pruden, the director of the National Keratoconus Foundation. We're a patient advocacy program based in Southern California at the University of California at Irvine. NKCF provides information to families and raises public awareness of this cornea disease. We invite you to visit our website, nkcf.org, and sign up for our newsletter and register for our bi-monthly webinars. We also post news on our Instagram and Facebook pages. This is Chang Reaction, our Ask the Expert podcast. Our partner for this endeavor is Dr. Clark Chang, a noted keratoconus expert and a friend of NKCF. We often receive questions about life with keratoconus, and Dr. Chang has offered to give his advice on these questions. We'll tape the answers and archive them for the public. Dr. Chang is currently the Director of Specialty Contact Lenses on the Cornea Service at Wills Eye Hospital in Philadelphia. He's also a member of the Medical Affairs team at Glaukos. That's the company that makes the FDA-approved crosslinking equipment and product. Dr. Chang is a graduate of the Pennsylvania College of Optometry and a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry. He was named the NKCF Top Doc in 2020. I understand that Dr. Chang has just returned from the American Optometric Association National Meeting. And hello, Dr. Chang. I understand you received an award. Tell us about it.
Hi, Mary. I guess you want me to do a show and tell. I happen to have it right next to me. You can see my name. I know not everybody can see the award. I'm still looking for a place to hang it up. That's why it's like right next to my desk right at this moment, because I just got back from the American Optometric Association in Denver. So let's see if I can move it here so everybody can see it. It's the Luminary Award of 2021. So I'm just really honored that the association picked me as the recipient of this award. And so without further ado, I don't want everybody to think that that I only went to the association for this award, but I'm just really honored that it did happen. So thank you for giving me a moment to give a shout out to American Optometric Association, Mary.
Okay, here's the first one. Let's get started. We received an interesting question this month, and this is a subject that's getting more and more attention lately. Vivian wrote, "My husband has keratoconus. His father also had very bad eyesight. He was never diagnosed with keratoconus, but I think he may have had the disease. Our oldest son was diagnosed in his early 20s when he was in college. I'm worried that all of our children and grandchildren will be affected." So here's her question. Should we assume that all of my husband's relatives will have keratoconus?
Yeah, that's Vivian, that's a great question, because obviously that's something that comes to people's mind when they receive this diagnosis, especially when they are being told that there is a genetic predisposition or genetic linkage to keratoconus. So I mean, let's take a look at your husband's family history in this case, right? So while the medical history is not completely certain about your father-in-law, because he had bad eyesight, and we don't know if that's actually due to keratoconus or maybe other reason, which is a very common scenario when I'm talking to family members with, so when somebody's being diagnosed with keratoconus and going through the lineage, because there's earlier generations, sometimes they just assume that bad eyesight is a sign of function of time, and they may never really seek a formal diagnosis. But what we do know is that there is a genetic linkage, as I had just alluded to. And in fact, if you look at medical literature, the landscape of it to date, it shows or maybe up to about 24% of the cases we can trace that there is a familial pattern to it, inheritance pattern can be demonstrated, and such as in like studies of twins, for example, right? So the reason that it's not more than that is because this is a multigenic disease, so meaning not a single gene, at least that's likely the reason, so that we are still currently searching for what combination of genetic locus or loci that combine together to maybe form or bring this, cause this disease to emerge, and also maybe environmental factors. Obviously, part of it could be that we currently don't know what's the most sensitive way of diagnosing this disease until the condition is about to occur in the eye. So certainly there'll be, I know that there are technology of testing genetically that is being developed, and so that may become something that we can discuss in the future. But regardless, the inheritance pattern that is demonstrated by your husband and one of your children, right? There is familial linkage there. So while the, as I said, while the genetic combination, what combination of genes is really caused, it can, be detected to know that we can predict the keratoconus occurrence years and years ahead of time. We don't know, while we don't know that yet right now. We do know that the risk factor of the risk of developing keratoconus in a person when they have a first-degree family member, such as your son and his father, the risk is extremely high. It's typically about 4 to 5 times more than anybody in the general population that it doesn't have the same first the same situation where they have at least one first-degree family member that has keratoconus. So the risk is very high. However, that doesn't guarantee absolute expression of the disease, meaning it doesn't guarantee that all of your children will have the disease or all of the grandchildren, but their risk is a lot higher than in general population. So what are other factors that we know of in terms of something that may also make somebody who's more susceptible to developing keratoconus once they have this genetic predisposition, meaning your children and your grandchildren. And we know that environmental factor can be a predisposing risk factor. So something like eye rubbing, maybe due to allergy, maybe due to dry eye, or maybe just as a habit. So those are the things that you want to carefully monitor in your children, in your grandchildren, advise them to avoid trauma to the eye, and that includes heavy eye rubbing to the eye. And like I said, if there's any seasonal allergy that actually affects the eye, or maybe even perennial, meaning all year round allergy that affects the eye, or maybe dryness of the eye that causes mild itching, then stimulates the response to eye rubbing. You want to avoid all that. So those are with or without keratoconus in your children and your grandchildren, because the risk level is higher. You do want to at least advise them to avoid those activities that we have just discussed. And another risk factor could be aging, right? So what I mean by that is we know that keratoconus is a disease that occurs younger. So we tend to kind of take a breather once somebody passes into their 20s. But understand that this is a disease that can occur, around puberty or younger, but can also occur at a much older age. So just because you're in your 20s or late 20s doesn't guarantee, if you have the risk factor higher than other people, doesn't guarantee that you won't have this disease in your 30s. So therefore, it's something that you want to advise your children to be monitored early on and regularly with your eye doctors or their own eye doctors, and make sure that you shared such family history of a first-degree relative having this diagnosis, and therefore the eye doctors will know what to do to advise your children and your grandchildren as they're being monitored for potentially developing keratoconus. So Mary, hopefully that's clear. Will we have another question that came in for me to answer?
Thank you. No, that was really helpful. And it is of a lot of interest to people these days. Next question that we're going to throw you is not so much a medical question, but we hear from patients and their families a lot here at NKCF asking for help with paying for the treatments, especially crosslinking. And I have to tell people that we don't have any funds to support them. But do you have any tips that you can offer people and patients who are looking for their insurance coverage and trying to understand what kinds of treatments will be covered?
Yes. So again, another great question, because it's a sad situation when we know that there's something we can do to help patients to slow down and stop the progression of a disease and preventing worsening in their visual symptom when we have access to such medical technology, but yet patients cannot afford it. So that is definitely something that I do get asked a lot as well. So if your keratoconus progression is detected, and I said that because your doctor may recommend FDA-approved corneal cross-linking procedure, as I said, to slow down or to stop the progression of such disease, but the criteria from your insurance, because we have so many insurance policies in our healthcare environment within US, different carriers may actually specify different sets of criteria to say what counts, what qualifies you once you have keratoconus being diagnosed to you, what kind of changes or progression qualifies you to be reimbursed for your doctor's office to be reimbursed of this procedure, so you don't necessarily have to pay the entire procedure out of your pocket. It can be a very confusing situation, but fortunately, after the FDA approval that was given to one specific cross-linking treatment protocol since 2016, the insurance coverage has gotten a lot better. So meaning if you've tried it and for whatever reason your doctor's office couldn't get reimbursement and that stopped you from being able to undergo treatment that you need, in the last couple years that has the FDA approved cross-linking has improved, in my personal experience clinically, that the coverage situation, the reimbursement situation has improved. But how would you find out? So a good online resource to help you with your research, maybe prior to going to your doctor's office, you could also help them out, because again, it's a confusing situation, not just for patients themselves, but also for the billing team in your doctor's office. So go to this website called livingwithkeratoconus.com, and we'll include that website link in the description of the video. So you can go to that website, livingwithkeratoconus.com, and it has actually an online interactive insurance guide tab that you could click on, and then you could search your policy and to see what criteria and whether, at the very least, whether or not it's covered. And there is a very wide acceptance of coverage and reimbursement policy now, especially in the last year or two. So I definitely recommend everybody to look it up prior to going to your doctor's office. Mary, do we have another question today?
Yeah, and that's, we also direct people to the Living with Keratoconus website, which is sponsored by Glaukos. We send people there, but they do a really good job of keeping up to date records on what exactly insurance companies are covering and what kind of information the doctor needs to submit in advance, and it's made it a lot easier for a lot of people. Everybody sort of understands what they have to do in order to be covered by their policy. So thanks for talking about that. I know that's something that we like I said, we direct people to a lot, and I'm glad you talked about it. So the last question we'll end with tonight is one that we get all the time, and I'm sure you are constantly asked this question. So Judy wrote us, and she said she has dry eye, and what she calls normal contact lenses don't work. So I'm assuming she's talking about GP or gas permeable lenses, and she doesn't exactly say what don't work means, but let's assume that because of her dry eye, her eyes feel gritty or scratchy, or maybe it's uncomfortable to wear the contacts after a short period of time, or maybe her eyes are red and irritated looking. Well, you can sort of describe some of the things that you commonly see when people say their contacts don't work. So she asks, would scleral lenses work? What would you tell her?
Yeah, that's again another great question. I smile a little bit earlier when you said this is a question that we get asked all the time, because I feel like all these questions today have been so good. They're questions that you and I get asked all the time, not just this specific question, but definitely about contact lens tolerance and the feeling of the irritation related to dryness, and maybe even other fitting related characteristic. In this case, that's focused on the dryness. I sort of took a different assumption in that the patient is probably talking about my assumption when she said normal contact lens. I was assuming more either custom or possibly even disposable soft lenses, because fortunately some keratoconus patients, small group, but some patients are able to wear soft lenses if they are milder in their presentation of keratoconus, or maybe after treatment that has slowed and stopped their keratoconus progression early on. That is a possibility. So the reason I said that is because soft lenses act more like a sponge, right? So it's porous and it likes to soak up fluid from the surrounding environment very much like a sponge. And so for them to stay comfortable and give you consistent quality of vision, it needs to sustain itself with fluid. And since it is on your eye, the immediate source of fluid is your tear. So it will soak up your own tear, sort of borrowing from your own tear film on the surface of the eye. And so if you're borderline dry eye, meaning you don't actually feel any type of dryness or irritation until you put your contact lenses on, because it actually is reducing by soaking up your tear, it's reducing the level of tear that you have to lubricate the surface of your own eyes. So therefore, a gas permeable lens material, we used to call them hard lens material. It's evolved and gotten better, more breathable, slightly the modulus or the texture is slightly softer, and we have better coating technology nowadays that can help with a lot of these dry eye related issue in a gas permeable lens material. But they are known to be more tear friendly. Why is that? Because it's not as thick, it's smaller in size, it's not as thick, and it's very compacted, so it doesn't require a lot of hydration borrowed from your tear. So it used to be that we actually, with or without keratoconus, patients with dryness symptoms or have dry eye diagnosis, maybe related to other systemic conditions, we actually used to recommend gas permeable lenses. They're not quite as comfortable as soft lenses for some of the patients. There are definitely patients of mine who said that their corneal gas permeable lenses are still as comfortable as what they remember their soft lenses used to be after they were diagnosed with keratoconus. So I would say for first stop, if you are talking about soft lens or custom soft lenses and your doctors have discussed with you with regard to the fact that discomfort and irritation is related to dryness of your eyes, then switching to a gas permeable lens may already help. You don't necessarily need to try a scleral lens. However, I call that more the passive approach to help a dry patient, right? If you are at a certain level of dryness of your eyes that you even have symptoms without wearing any contact lenses, then potentially the severity is higher. You need a little more help. So a more proactive approach is to put on a lens that can create a little reservoir underneath it, so that when it covers your cornea right here, there's a fluid pocket in between the lens and the cornea itself. Therefore, you're actively nourishing or lubricating the surface of your cornea or your front surface of the eye, we call ocular surface. So it's a more proactive way if you utilize a lens like that. What's an example of a lens like that? Scleral lens is one, right? So if you use scleral lens, provided that you use a good combination of preservative-free saline solution or tear solution, or obviously follow the instruction by your eye doctors, that fluid that reservoir space that holds the fluid will nourish and lubricate the surface of the eye when you have the lens on the eye, provided that you insert the lens correctly, meaning you're not leaving an airspace underneath it, you're actually completely filling it with fluid. Then it will definitely help with patient greatly reduce that dryness symptom that they would have on the surface of the eye. So sometimes a different cleaning solution could also help pending your tear chemistry. So definitely make sure, and like I said, sometimes an extra coating around the lens can also help preventing the dehydration characteristic of even a scleral lens can still occur on the front part of the lens. So make sure you discuss all that with your own eye doctor, decide what level of dryness your condition you are in, and make sure that you discuss all these approaches that can be prescribed in combination. You don't have to just do one thing. The more severe your dryness is, the more help you need. And so I tend to prescribe a combination of treatment for my patient that may just be, in a scleral lens with the proper coating, with the proper combination of preservative-free tear fluid, all that added together to help with the comfort and vision all day long. So make sure that you keep that in mind when you're exploring this with your eye doctors or your contact lens specialist. Okay, I bet you, Mary, think that I'm talking everybody's ear out, so I'm gonna stop here, Mary.
Well, thank you. And, and I think that it's so good for you to sort of tell people there's lots of options out there and really have that discussion with your doctor about what works for you. And if the first thing doesn't work, then maybe the second trial will. So, there's more than one solution to people's problems. So, I want to thank you for taking the time to answer some of these common questions. Maybe next month we'll get something that's unusual. Look for another Chang reaction next month with answers to more of your questions about all things keratoconus. If anyone listening has a question they would like answered, go to the nkcf.org website, and under the For Patients tab, you'll find Ask the Expert Chang Reaction. In that tab, you can post your question confidentially, and we'll answer it at an upcoming episode. So thanks for listening. I want to tell everybody that, let's see, here we go. Next. I can't make it go. There we go. National Keratoconus Foundation operates with the support of our friends and donors. If you feel the urge to support us by listening to Chang Reaction or participating in some of our other webinars, you can make a much appreciated gift to the UCI Foundation, which will be used for us to expand our programs. Closing, I want to thank Dr. Clark Chang for taking time out of his schedule to work with us and to answer your questions. Dr. Chang, good night.
Yes, and let me, before we go quickly, Mary, if I could say, being that the holiday season is upon us for those of us in North America, such as tomorrow's Canada Day, and in a couple days will be our U.S. Independence Day. So I just want to make sure that typically around this time is where people, fireworks and celebration to sometimes eye trauma can occur. It's usually, pretty high incidence rate around this time. So I want everybody to please stay safe. Remember, we talked about avoid eye rubbing, avoid trauma to the eye, especially, with a condition like keratoconus. So please stay safe, stay informed. Hopefully, that means checking back frequently to our podcast with NKCF, Chang Reaction, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.